Afternoon, everybody. My name is Stephen Yang. I'm based here in the Bay Area, and it's such a different feeling from last week in New York, right? Sure. My background is 25 years in real estate. Started at Deutsche Bank, predecessor Wolfenson and Company. So Paul Volcker.
You should get over there because you're off camera right now.
Okay.
Okay.
Like over here?
Right there, perfect.
Right there. Okay. I feel like standing.
That's fine. Yeah.
Good. All right. And so, at a young age, I was banking all the hotel companies, and we did a lot of M&A work for hotel consolidation through the 90s and early 2000s. I started at the real estate firm at Deutsche Bank. So we had a lot of investments in Europe, a lot of investments in the States, ran most of their hotel group there. And then in 2006, started a company called Square Mile Capital with Jeff Citrin. And then 2010, moved out here and started a company called Walnut Hill Group, backed by a few Taiwanese families. And then 2013, started Yen Capital. And so we're raising our third fund now. Fund 1 was 12 million, 12 investors. Fund 2 was 30 million, 30 investors. And Fund 3, we're shooting for 100 million now. And so I like to just start off with this first slide because so much of everything is technology and phones now. And I really feel empowered to explain that this is my ikigai. I don't know if you guys have ever heard this term. Great, thanks, Maureen. It's really important for me to do what I love. And what I do is an expression of my entire life, right? And so what I found as a common theme through my career is I benefit, or my investors benefit, when people are uplifted by our investments, right? And so that could be time or money, right? And so throughout my career, I've just found people around me to educate, to teach, to learn, and to grow with, right? And that is really what's benefited me to, I think, have this opportunity today. And then, of course, we've touched on this a lot. I think of AI right now as a bit of an arms race between the US and China. And we're sort of importing a lot of talent from India, and I think that kind of tilts it in our favor some. So my simplistic view of the world is the US is a winner in the next 10 years in this field, and it becomes more and more prevalent. So that's my oversimplification of kind of listening to Eric Schmidt and see kind of where LLMs are going and how powerful this technology is and how disruptive it is as well. So that's my 2 cents. And then, this second slide, I think, is very similar to the slide presented this morning. With a steepening of the yield curve comes a recession, and that's been proven out over the last 60 years. So I think there is probably, in my estimation, a 25 to 35% chance of recession. I'm not quite as, talking about a biblical event as he was this morning, but I do think it's a risk, and I think it's something that we are always mindful of. There are 3 values that I'm going to explain to you today. The first is a human-centered approach to our business. So I think a lot of real estate investors are not really as focused on this. Maybe they're focused on one aspect. Let's say like a condo developer is really focused on his end user's experience in his condominium, right? But I think our approach is much more holistic, right? So when we're successful in investment, we're able to articulate a strategy that our investors, our employees, and our guests or our tenants all understand, right? And that becomes more of a self-fulfilling prophecy as we go. So whether our investment was in retail, office, multifamily, or hotels, the common theme here is that we have a very human-centered approach. Now, we're always going to be on top of technology, and as we look into budgeting for 2025, we're absolutely looking at all of our payrolls now and seeing, where we can utilize more technology and make people that we have that are good better. But I think this human-centered approach is very much how we think of the world. The second is We have a service culture in our firm. So, going back to even running an office building, 31 West 27th Street, for example, in New York, we had a much higher touch as a landlord with our tenants than I would say your average New York landlord, right? And I think that allows us to renew leases, keep tenants in the building longer, make sure we grow with them, right? And meet their needs in the short term. And so as we face this kind of next chapter, our investments aren't as focused on maybe pure office anymore because that space is just has kind of a glut of space. Like look at this building right now. I would imagine it's like 20% occupied, even though there's 20% used, I would say, out of the entire building, right? But service for others is our mantra, right? So we sold our management company, and we're focused really on just investments that can provide a higher level of service in the competitive set. Finally, structure is the last theme, right? And so, for example, all of our investors to date have been U.S. taxable investors, and a lot of our employees are immigrants, right? And so we're trying to align the interests of both parties, right, in our investments. And so we've done a good job, I think, in the last 10 years of just optimizing our after-tax returns to investors, which isn't always the case with your standard institutional real estate fund, right, where it gets very complex with ERISA requirements and what the institutions want. And so we use a lot of financial structuring, a lot of compensation structuring to make sure that we're getting the right outcome out of each person that's on our team. And our geographic focus is probably primarily Utah and Arizona going forward, right? We see a lot of stability and growth in those areas. We've done very well in our investments in those two states. We hold a lot of real estate in California still, and I think California is still a huge beneficiary from all this technology growth. But the laws are getting harder to be an employer in California, and I think also harder to be a landlord in California as well. So we're kind of pivoting a little bit and diversifying more into Utah and Arizona. We'll look at deals in other states as well, but Utah and Arizona, when we're doing a direct deal, is our focus currently. And we have 4 business plans. Right now we're seeing a lot of, especially at the two ends of sort of the normal curve of residential. There's a lot of intersection between residential and hotel, or higher service residential, if you will, or hotels becoming almost like 2 and 3 week stays in some cases for people, or Airbnb is sort of in the middle. We were late stage investors in Airbnb as well, and so we do have in our third fund an allocation towards venture as well. But these 4 areas, I think out of these 4 areas, I think everybody's familiar with these terms: adaptive reuse, manufactured housing, condo hotel, single family land. We just exited an investment in single family land called 12 Bridges in Roseville. That was very successful. We built a hotel. We were Marriott Developer of the Year, in fact, for our Cottonwood Heights, Cottonwood Courtyard. We sold the Skyrock, a hotel, to Bill Marriott, and licensed our way of service, Spoken.life, back to Bill Marriott. And then we still own the Flamingo Resort. And I forgot to mention, for the best question in the room, there's a small group of you guys. You can win a 2-night getaway with a spa credit and a food and beverage credit for today. So ask good questions. We also do a lot of co-GP deals. So what I realized through Fund 1 and Fund 2 is that with a small group of investors doing kind of these niche deals that we poured our energy into, I wasn't particularly diversified personally or for my investors, right? So I think these are all people that we've done business with between 10 and 20 years, and bring us interesting deals. We talk about a lot of deals together. So this allows us to really diversify our capital and our efforts, right? So that we can kind of focus on what we do best.
But you're the sponsor primarily of most of your deals.
Yeah, we're always, back to that structure slide, Marty. Every investor in our fund gets a share, and we're going to increase the share up to 50% now. of our deal level promote.
Wow.
So that kind of evens out a lot of the fund carried interest that eats away at investors. So for example, when we exited Courtyard, our institutional investor made a 25% return and our fund investors made a 30% return on that investment, right? Because they got a share of our deal level promote. Maureen.
Yeah, it was a question actually on that structure. When you're talking about doing deals with the GPs, I thought to myself, like, well, why not make your LPs happier rather than other GPs? And so just thinking through like how you were going to roll that out, because you went from 12 to 30, and I don't know how many you're putting to get with 100. It becomes more complex to manage the co-investment syndication process. So that's kind of maybe if you just talk a little bit more about that.
That's a great question. So as we've evolved, we've done more syndications.
Right.
Early on, we did a lot more institutional deals. So like Centerbridge Partners, Westbrook Partners, Greenfield Partners, Grandview Partners were our partners as the LP in the deal, right? And they would pay us a deal level promote, and that if the deal went well, that deal level promote would go to me personally or whoever the sponsor was, right? Because that person's taking kind of the most risk, right? And then what I learned in the downturn is that like, if I put $1 into a deal, everyone's looking at what I do, from the bank to the investors to the LP, right? And so that's why this fund is going to be bigger than the other funds, so that we have excess liquidity at all times to protect that investment, number one. And number two, in terms of the structure, the syndicated deals are actually easier because they endow me with more control. But the institutional deals are more complicated because I have major decision rights that have to go back and forth with Centerbridge. Right? So syndicated deals, everyone just comes in. We have like $100,000 unit. You take 10 units, you take 20 units, and then it kind of goes. Right? But then everyone's in one LP doc for the deal level doc, and then of course there's a fund level different LP doc, right? But yeah, it's all. I mean, one of the nice things about our fund is like, I talk to my friends about their fundraises and they're allocating anywhere between 2 million plus for their fundraise costs. I think YIP 2, our total fundraise cost was 25,000, right? Because we had been revised kind of YIP 1, which was a very, like, I think what you get with us is institutional quality legal work, due diligence work, but at a cost that's to, like a normal human being. Yeah. Because there's as most people in the room know, there's a lot of ways to mark up real estate services. So here's some like deals that we're finding very interesting in the market today. These are outside of kind of what we would do as a sponsor. So this is Victrix, which is one of the people on that slide. These are all office buildings that have been completely vacated and sold at kind of bargain basement pricing, right? And so, to take a deal, for example, here, your purchase price is $29,000 a unit in Cincinnati for this Macy's headquarters building in Cincinnati, and then your all-in basis is actually close to $200,000. So almost all your money is going into the construction or rehab to convert this to apartments, right? But in each of these deals, I think what Marty found interesting here is that there's new market tax credits, there's historic tax credits, there's opportunity zone benefits. So in a lot of these deals, we're getting to almost a negative basis after all the tax credits, right? And so where we think the world is headed is there's an affordability issue, there's an aging population issue. And so we want to play at that part of it, because then the government tends to help more when you're playing with that. And then the demand side of the equation just seems like it's insatiable, right? In some of these areas, right? So manufactured housing is also an area that's really interesting to us.
But these are not in the core areas that your fund is looking at. So
yeah,
are these special purpose vehicles? How do you invest in those?
No, they'll go through the fund. We'll just put in a smaller amount and we'll be the co-GP on it, right? Is how we'll invest in those.
You underwrite it as well, though. So okay.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, great. The giveaway is working. Here, I'll start on the right and go to the left.
Me?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So in your portfolio right now, and you have the Flamingo, that's a boutique, it's not part of Marriott, but then you're all excited about your new hotel in Utah that is part of Marriott. So talk about the trade-off of being beholden to Marriott, but having people like me, you know, platinum guy, seeing your hotel promoted, but the boutique, probably I've never heard of it, but it's a boutique and it's kind of nichey. So
Yeah,
could you
what's your
talk
name?
about
Sorry,
what?
what is your name?
Oh, I'm sorry, Andrew Hurwitz. I'm
Andrew.
speaking tomorrow.
Great, Andrew, great question and great segue for the next slide here.
Oh, sorry.
No, I think if you look back at my career, I helped start Ace Hotels. I was an early investor in Nomad Hotels, right? And I could see the power of a hotel to turn around a neighborhood. So over the course of like 2006 to 2015, we did 4 deals just in the Nomad area of New York, right?
Yeah.
Some were hotels, some were office to residential conversion, right? But I think today, what is happening, at least post-pandemic, is the brands have gotten a lot stronger, right? Yeah, so you as a platinum member, you know, you stay a certain number of nights a year to keep that status, right? And then you also get preferential check-in times.
Everything.
Yeah, you see a lot of stuff. And as an owner, I get certain privileges with rates, right? For the Marriott portfolio, right? So I've been staying in more Marriotts myself as well. But I think 5 years ago, when we made the decision to go with Marriott on that deal, one, it was, you know, I'm a Chinese guy doing a deal in a Mormon place, right? So I felt like, to be honest, having Marriott as my partner was
Good,
a good
yeah.
idea.
Helped
right?
you out in Utah.
Just to be very frank with you. But I think fast forward to today, I think that the distribution networks of these brands is so much stronger, you know, than we can keep up with as an independent. So actually, with the Flamingo, we're going to be putting that in January into the Hilton system.
There you go,
You know,
see?
it's going to be part of Tapestry at a pretty low cost because they're looking to agglomerate, you know, projects like this too. So I think it is an ideal time to invest in the Flamingo. We're going to take a preferred equity investment into that. That's going to come preferred to 45 million of equity, syndicated equity, and just behind a C-PACE loan of 6.5 million, and then the primary mortgage of 29 million. So, you know, most of our deals we capitalize that way, fairly lowly levered. But I think it's just kind of a critical point in the Flamingo cycle where you're going to see it jump from being put into the Hilton system, because that corporate travel there is we're finding much harder to get to in the midweek now without a brand.
Right. I mean, if somebody like me shows up at a boutique hotel, I'm a nobody. It's not fun.
Right. Sorry, go ahead.
How do you manage deal pipeline and match it both with your LP base and their desires with your overall thesis, particularly in targeting distress, perhaps? And then also, how does that feed into portfolio construction in terms of weighting?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, I think, you know, my friend Chop Keenan, I don't know if you guys know him, he's one of the prolific developers of Palo Alto. So he was buying land in Palo Alto when it was, you know, orange and apple orchards, and, you know, now owns 17 buildings in Palo Alto. And he's like, Steve, stick to your knitting, buy hotels right now, right? and there's got to be so much distress, you know, but I'm actually very cautious with hotels right now. I think there's a lot of change happening in how people use hotels, how they're distributed, and the cost to run a hotel. So, you know, what looks like distress today, it may not be that they may be the value of it, you know. I'm not jumping in with 2 feet in the hotel space today. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's been a, you know, blue state pushback on Airbnb,
Yeah.
right? Like I was actually, Richmond, Virginia is where my daughter lives, is heavily Democrat, although it's a purple state.
Yeah.
And they've outlawed Airbnb for the most part, like New York and other cities, you know, they've heavily restricted it.
It's fascinating.
And so doesn't that favor hotels, number one, and number two, do you think that's going to be a permanent situation?
I think I look at the whole P&L of a hotel. Often as a hotel owner, honestly, I feel like the consumer of everything in this country. Like, I'm dependent on housekeeping. I'm dependent on hourly wages. I'm dependent on,
Airlines.
Airlines. I you know, like, it's such a, you know, tail that wags the dog. You know what I mean?
You guys
It's
are all
like,
connected.
yeah, so, like, look at New York, for example, Marty. Last week, I paid $800 to stay at that, you know, Westin next to
A night?
A night,
That's all, wow.
right? Right, next, because I was a Marriott owner's rate, right? And because New York City actually leased all of the out of borough hotels for shelter. shelter
Right,
people.
20% of New York City hotels today are being used for illegal aliens.
You know, so we had compression of Fashion Week and so forth, but you know, I think New York City did a good job of actually helping out the hotel ownership industry. Here, if they've done nothing, you know, it's really, really hard, I think, here in this particular city, you know, to be a hotel owner today. Like, I don't know how actually the math works on a lot of these hotels. Yeah, Maureen.
I have a question, I have two questions. So the first question has to do with, I've looked at a number of kind of hotel construction properties where, they have the condos, they have the hotel rooms, and they're pre-selling them, and I've noticed that they have a lot of international buyers, in particular from Latin America, Mexico. How do you think that's potentially affecting the market in terms of just maybe the asset pricing? That's one of the things I've been thinking about. The second one is, you know, there's a lot of these projects that get started, but then
Gets to get
what's
away.
the, what's the,
Here you go, Maureen, there you go.
She already won.
She won.
Not over
It's
yet.
the compound nature. Wait, I think we need to put that in before
The
here.
time isn't up yet.
well, the other thing is the construction financing. I've just noticed that that's a really big issue now. And so like, how do you think about that, especially as like a lot of traditional lenders have, you know, come back, and then you have the
Yeah.
hard asset guys, like, how do you frame that? And then this is like a question, because it relates to San Francisco, but when I think of, I have this friend of mine, he's like a mobile park homeowner,
Yeah.
he's like that guy. And,
I
but I
told you
think,
that was a great place to be if you were
That-
bought mobile parks
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
where
60 years ago.
we're thinking a lot about that space.
in Ohio, you buy them,
Yeah.
but I think to myself, if you were taking like these buildings in Cincinnati, I would be like, where's the public hospital next to that? And are you gearing toward like older people that want to be in a center, or are you gearing toward that young, I'm a person with a dog and I don't need a kid park, but I need a dog
Right,
park, right?
Right, absolutely.
So
The dog
those are
park-
three questions, but those are,
Yeah, there are three really good questions, and they actually hit on like thematically how we're thinking of Fund 3, right? Is we're thinking of Fund 3 is there's a massive shift at the bell ends of our age demographic, right? So how a 30-year-old uses a hotel and how a 60-year-old hotel, you know, uses a apartment or condo or mobile home park is rapidly changing on both ends of the spectrum, I think, right? So where we want to invest in is like age restricted mobile home parks, right? So I'm looking at 55 plus for that demographic. I won't touch anything that's not age restricted in that segment, for example, right?
are they already retired, or you think they're still working?
They could be working, they could be retired, you
Yeah.
know, but the point is like
Good income?
they have a probably a better credit profile generally,
Mhm.
okay, at that 55 plus, like that eliminates a lot of your problems in the mobile home park. And then secondly, there's a real affordability crisis, I think, for that segment of the population. So I think if you can deliver, and I think these mobile homes are also getting better and better quality, right? And that's one of the reasons we focus on Utah and Arizona is like easier to heat and cool a building in those areas, right? And so, you know, modular construction has come a long way. So I think that unit has improved quality a lot, right? And then you're talking about a fraction of the cost of single family ownership, right? So that's a space that I'm really interested in. On the luxury side that you're talking about, that is definitely skewing the market. The condo and hotel crossover. And I think what we like so far, Utah deal, there was another pad next to it that we're gonna build condos on, and it's accessible to snowbirds. So there's an international Chinese and Swiss buyer pool for that condominium. But we didn't get comfortable, to your point, because the construction financing, the private equity all wanted us to have 20% pre-sales, right? And so I'm like, look, if I want to have 20% pre-sales, now I need to risk $2 million of capital before I have this, you know, thing financed, right? And so I do think there is a gap there, and I don't think I want to take all of that risk myself, essentially, right? Yeah.
I'd like to know where you stand like on modular building. I just received recently a pretty substantial deal on a modular producer, and I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about it.
I think it really depends on how close you are to the facility where they're going to build it. You know, so in Utah, we were fairly close to Idaho, where there's a big producer of these units, right? But the polygamous framers, to be honest, out of southern Utah were still cheaper, right? So I built stick on top of a podium there, cheaper than I could do modular, right? Yeah, and that deal was interesting because we had $7.5 million of TIF money. And so again, back to this thing, we're always trying to kind of scoot our basis down through unique incentives. So we actually bought a podium that was punctured all where we needed to be for all of our bathrooms on the first floor. And then all we had to do, no excavation risk, was build stick on top of that, right? And so I think we just think of risk probably different than others. Like in modular, I think that it's definitely moving that direction. And if you go to Merit's, owners conference a couple of years ago, they were just like modular, but I think there's still risks with it. I think the capitalization of some of these modular builders is not quite there yet. You're taking some credit risk on them. There's also credit risk with your lender because they're going to want to see the modular units delivered on your site before they're going to advance you construction monies, right? But I think it can reduce your window to construction, right? And so I don't know if we're there yet. I think it's very site specific. So I wouldn't want to make a general comment.
Is hotel feeling the same impact of insurance that multifamily is feeling and other places? I mean, I guess
100%.
California has an insurance issue, right? Not just
Yeah.
Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, again, as a hotelier, I'm buying workers' comp, I'm buying general liability, I'm buying property, right? I'm in all those markets.
I was gonna say
you know?
facilities.
Property and
insurance.
casualty insurance
Exactly.
in
And so-
California.
P&C in California has gone up massively, right? And all of us have had to eat that. We do everything we can to fireproof our buildings, and bring down the cost of that insurance, right? Including on the workers' comp side, just having a very, very clean record on the workers' comp side, right? But insurance is a huge issue across the board.
I know that you said that there's many of these buildings that are changing basis, in opportunity zones, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I don't know for the total market, that's like, depending on how the economy swings,
Yeah,
could it go from a lot to a really lot, like a lot?
I think as adaptive reuse is what you're speaking about, Marty, specifically, right?
Sure.
It's always going to be a niche thing, you want to take like a bunch of these downtown buildings and convert them to residential overnight, but they don't work like that, right? Like 1526th Street, remember where the surgeon, she was there last
Yes.
week. She was actually resident in one of the buildings I had converted 20 years ago.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, and that building was a 5,000 square foot floor plate, 100 feet deep. Like, fuck, man, that's hard to convert, okay? We were able to convert it into 2,500 square foot units and sell, these 4 and 5 bedroom units because dude built Shake Shack across the street, right? Like that was kind of lucky, you know what I mean? But it's hard to convert one of these huge buildings into
Well, I think
residential.
we were told like only
Yeah.
5 to 10% of New York
Yeah.
office can be converted.
Like when you go back to this Carew Towers deal, like my friend Anoop has been doing this for 20 years. He cut his teeth in Philadelphia doing this stuff, right? And it's hard work, and every day he wakes up, he's trying to cut that budget. That's it. He's one of the smartest dudes I know, and that's all he does, is budget manage that thing, Yeah.
You mentioned looking at Arizona, but what about the water issue there? I mean, I've been
Huge
reading
issue.
all these things about like the Colorado River and they're gonna, yeah. So, but you still think it's,
No, I think that's something so without that water issue, I wouldn't even look at Arizona either from the flip side, because like there's just so much land, right? But the water issue actually makes things more scarce, if that makes sense. So where we're buying in Arizona is usually like northern Arizona, where there's let's say like if you look at any of our projects, we're trying to use the lowest amount of water we can, right? But once we get, and then mobile home park is also lower usage of water per acre than, let's say, like one of these hotels, But I think it's a huge issue, but it's something that you can diligence and make sure that you have the rights to it. Like you brought up Native American tribes earlier, and they've actually supported our investments in this area, right? Like one of the weird things about me is I'm like a cultural voyeur. Like people just invite me into their spaces, you know, so I've actually been to Sundance, for example. I can't talk publicly about that, but I can tell you that the Native American culture is very precious, you know, and I have a friend at University of New Mexico that one of his primary jobs is to fight for water rights for the tribes, you know. And so, you know, when we look at a piece of dirt, we're looking at it over the course of time, right? Both from a geological perspective, but also historical and cultural perspective. What was there? What wants to be there? You know, and what doesn't want to be there?
Hasn't Phoenix contracted with an Israeli company to build a pipeline from Mexico to Phoenix for water?
Right. I mean, we haven't invested in Phoenix proper, right? Like when we look at Arizona, it's like, you know, Page, you know, over there, right? It's like Prescott, right? Places like that.
So you mentioned, obviously your words, Chinese American, you employ a lot of immigrants, to Maureen's point, international investors. What about doing one of your deals as like a dedicated EB5 deal?
Yeah, no, one of my partners,
wondering about
so on this
that.
prior page, Huntington Hotel Group, he's done, I think, there's a woman named Angel in DC, and she has done a lot of EB5 deals with Kevin Kiefer. So Kevin is my 50-50 partner on that Cottonwood Courtyard. And so he's my EB5 expert. If we do EB5, we'll be with him. Yeah,
Okay.
It's gotta be new build, gotta be Marriott or Hilton, and then
Yeah,
Are there any restrictions on EB5 in opportunity zones, or how does that play out, or does it?
Yeah,
it-
yeah, they like it.
Any other questions? I think this is a fascinating topic, and since we're in San Francisco, we know Maxwell Drever. He had some great opportunities in Houston back in 1990s when the markets crashed and you could get real estate for a song, and he was given some big favors by the city of Houston for buying apartment buildings at a low tax basis. And we talked about Rich Richmond also at dinner last week, who had a fantastic deal,
Yeah.
bailing out public housing.
My whole career is based on relationships, you know, this reputation and relationships.
Fantastic.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, thanks so much, John.